What's up, guys? Welcome back to Libertalia Game Supply. We're going to take a look at an updated version of the water control deck that I showed maybe like a month ago now. The reason for this is because a version of this deck topped a tournament recently, came near topping. I think it ended up in 77th place, which is pretty high for a deck that really isn't represented in the meta. That deck list was on Zodiac Duelist. If you want to check it out, join that Facebook group. There's some nonsense in there, but there's also some cool deck profiles that get posted every now and again, as well as like if you want to keep up with meta deck profiles, that stuff is always in there. So shout out to them real quick. But anyway, we'll get into this. So I kept some of the texts that were in there that I just hadn't thought of that were really interesting. I cut some of the ones I just didn't like that much, or perhaps I just wasn't using them the way that the original deck builder was intending. But the idea of the deck pretty much stays the same. You want to get Kairyu-Shin and Electric Jellyfish on the field at the same time. The Jellyfish protects the Kairyu-Shin. The Kairyu-Shin searches your traps over and over, and then shuts your opponent down to only being able to control one non-water monster. So if your opponent's deck is not playing any water monsters, or very few that aren't super powerful or super useful to them, you pretty much lock them down. It's kind of like a Kaiser Coliseum type thing. So, you know, my Bujin loving heart always loves a little Kaiser Coliseum action. So we'll go quick through the monsters, kind of, because a lot hasn't really changed. So your water lineup, I guess, like the original lineup, is pretty much the same, or exactly the same. So first off, we got Triple Kairyu-Shin. When he's on the field, he does that little Kaiser Coliseum effect, locking you down to only water monsters. And then once per turn, he can search a Yuumi or a Kairyu-Shin spell or trap, or one Sea Stealth spell or trap. So we play a lot of them. You can search most of your deck off of the Kairyu-Shin, makes it really useful. Most of the time you're going to be searching the Dark Reef so that you can go to your big explosive plays, and then he's also got some abilities to like set stuff up to protect him from getting destroyed, because he's not that big. He's 2000 attack. Under Legendary Ocean he's at 2200, which is still something that a lot of people can beat over pretty well, so we want to be able to protect him. The one Mega Fortress Whale, this thing got even better with this little tech here that we'll explain in a second, but this one you're not usually summoning unless it's off Dark Reef or off the Tremora. He does two things, one on your turn, one on your opponent's turn. On your opponent's turn in the battle phase, he can pop a monster that they control. On your turn, he can make it so you can attack directly that turn with all your water monsters. So he's kind of an OTK enabler, more or less. If you can get, you know, this and this on field, get the Dark Reef, and then set up a big explosive play on your opponent's turn where you get this and, you know, it's probably this, but it can be anything at that point. You can easily put 8,000 damage on the board and then just go in with direct attacks, as long as you're not, you know, getting beat by back row. Triple Electric Jellyfish, this thing's MVP for sure. So you can send a Yuumi from your hand, deck, or face-up field of the graveyard, special summon a water monster from your hand. That effect comes up occasionally, but usually not. The good effect is when your opponent activates a monster effect or spell card or effect while Yuumi's on the field, you can negate that effect, then you can make this card gain 600 attack and defense. That's so good. So if you get this on the field with this, it protects it from monster removal, it protects it from spell removal, and he keeps getting himself bigger and bigger and bigger, so this thing becomes a huge beater that can just keep negating stuff every turn. So it's a great card. I love it at 3. The one Doom Kraken, Yuumi's on the field, target a water monster you control except Doom Kraken, and one monster your opponent controls, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, return that monster you control to the hand, and if you do that, destroy that opponent's monster. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can return this card to the hand, and if you do, negate the attack. So he kind of just bounces back and forth from hand to field. Usually it's just from your hand to the field, and that's most of the time going to clear the way for you really pushing for game. But it's nice that he's got a lot of utility. At 1 it's good because his effect isn't powerful enough to justify needing to use it many times, plus he can put himself back if you need to. So 1 I like. Maiden of the Aqua, this is only here because it's treated as Yuumi on the field. So if you have to send your Legendary Ocean and don't have an extra way of getting the other one, or getting it back on the field like with Sea Stealth, or having, you know, the second one up already, or whatever the case may be, it acts as Yuumi, so you don't lose all of your Yuumi based effects. We got the one Tremora, so this thing is here because it works really well. This is one of the techs from the Zodiac deck list. This is here because of its effect to special summon one water monster from your hand by discarding it. So The reason that comes up is because you have this little combo, this interaction between Foolish Burial Goods and Ice Barrier, or even just activating the Ice Barrier and using it, and then using its effect. So ultimately what you're doing is, if this is in your hand, you can search any of your water monsters, 5 or higher water monsters out of your deck, which is going to be these guys, and the salmon, but not really. So you're going to send it to the graveyard, then you're going to add it back to your hand, then you can discard this to special summon it. If this is not in your hand, and one of your water monsters that you want the special summon for is in your hand, you can send this and add this instead, and then discard it to get that special summon anyway. When I've gotten to use it, it works super well, super well. So I like this tech a lot. I'll definitely be keeping that in there. The triple, it's a terraforming for the Legendary Oceans, and then the Terra King Salmon, this is here because you get a lot of effects in this deck between the Fish Sonars and the Dark Reefs to special summon a normal water monster, so it's a free body. Under Legendary Ocean it's 2600 attack, and under Legendary Ocean you can normal summon it out of your hand without the tribute, so it's just a pretty good, like, one of your better options for water normal monsters. I suppose the whichever Gaga Gigo card is the level 6, I think has higher attack by 50, which would probably be the smarter play, but I just like the salmon better, so I'm playing it. Triple Legendary Ocean because you absolutely have to have it on the field. The 1 Terraforming to get the Legendary Ocean because you absolutely have to have it on the field. The 1 Sea Stealth because it acts as Yuumi and you absolutely have to have it on the field. And then the Fury of Karyushin. So I had the this one in here also, which is like a Raigeki. Didn't like it as much. It just didn't come up as often. I guess you could play it if you wanted to against decks that are a little bit more combo heavy. I just didn't get as much use out of it as I was hoping. So the Fury I like quite a bit still though. So you can activate it to search a Torrential Tribute, and then when it's in the graveyard, if one of your water monsters would be destroyed, you can banish it to prevent it from being destroyed. So ultimately, it works in 2 ways. So it can be searched off of the Karyushin, first of all. Then you would activate it and search the Torrential. So you can end board with, say, Legendary Ocean, Karyushin, and Torrential, and then have this in the graveyard. So if your opponent tries to summon something that would be removal of the Karyushin in some way, or of your spell in some way, you can Torrential to kill the monster, then banish the Fury to protect the Karyushin, and your board stays intact with that lockdown, even if it's a little bit weaker. Or, if you don't need the Torrential, it's in the graveyard to just prevent the destruction of Karyushin on its own against anything else. So super cool card, I like it there. Fish Sonar is kind of like Rhoda, add 1 level 7 or lower monster from your deck to your hand that mentions Yuumi, or as a water normal monster. Then if Yuumi is on the field, you can special summon 1 water normal monster from your deck. So it searches all of these, not that, all of these, and I guess technically that, but you're not going to search that. You're going to special summon that off of its second effect. So that's a Rhoda for your Karyushin, if not for your Electric Jellyfish. Triple Prosperity, it's cheaper now. It's not cheap by any means, but it's definitely the better draw card between this and the common Extravagance. Obviously, if you don't want to spend the money, buy the Extravagance. Instead, it does a very similar thing, but being able to dig for the solution that you're looking for is just better. That's why it's more expensive, right? Then the double Foolish Burial Goods, send a spell or trap from your deck to the graveyard. You're just going to be sending this. Called by to protect from hand traps. This I thought was an interesting tech of my own. Change of Heart, so ultimately the deck is focused on being that Kaiser Coliseum based deck. So if your opponent summons something and leaves it up for whatever reason, you can just Change of Heart and steal it. It clears the board, so even if you don't have this to attack directly, it clears the way for you to attack with everything. It's just something interesting, something different. In a deck that's kind of like anime based, you might as well play the anime card. The double Torrentials are for the Fury. You don't want to have the Fury and have also drawn the Torrential, and now that's useless and the Torrential becomes much weaker because of it. Double Ice Barrier because of the Foolish Burial Goods and the Tremora, as we explained earlier. Sea Stealth Attack. This thing's pretty cool. At 1, it seems fine. Maybe I would bump it to 2. If you wanted to not play this or something like that, you could bump it to 2, but it's searchable off of Karyushin. When it's activated, you can activate a Yuumi from your hand or graveyard. So usually what I'm using this for is that first effect. The second 2 can come up, but it's mostly for that first effect because you have to sacrifice one of your Yuumis, or send one of your Yuumis for the Dark Reef to activate, and then you're gonna hopefully chain the Sea Stealth attack. So once you send for cost, chain the Sea Stealth attack to just put it back on board if you have that option. Otherwise, you got to summon this thing. But you can just put it back on board, and then your 2 summons can be this and this instead of like this and this, and it becomes even stronger of a board. Its second 2 effects. Once per turn, you can banish 1 water monster you control until the end phase of this turn. Face-up spells and traps you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So it protects the Yuumi spells from whatever, so that's kind of a little bit of something. Usually what I use that effect for is if they target Karyushin with like a banish effect or a destruction effect, I would just bounce it off the board, take the damage, put it back on board, wipe it down to 1 again, and then you don't lose your Karyushin. And then the third effect at the start of the damage step, if your water monster whose original level is 5 or higher battles an opponent's monster, destroy that opponent's monster. That one doesn't come up very often at all. I guess technically it allows your Karyushin to get over pretty much anything, but usually you can get over those things without that, but it's there. Dark Reef. This thing is like one of the best cards in the deck, the reason you play it almost. So send 1 face-up Yuumi, control the graveyard, special summon up to 2 monsters with different names from your hand and or deck that mention Yuumi or are water normal monsters in defense position. Then if your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon any number of level 6 or lower water normal monster for your hand or deck. Until the end of your next turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except water monsters once per turn. So, as I kind of had mentioned over the course of the rest of this deck profile, you're going to send your Legendary Ocean, you're going to special summon 2, and then if your opponent had a monster, you can get your Salmon if it's still in your deck or in your hand. Turn 1, if you can get this and this on the field and search, you're going to search this, activate it on your opponent's turn, so you have this guy that negates things, and then this to keep the Yuumi effect, and you're doing a ton of damage to their abilities to play past you. It's a super good card. And then Triple Strike, it hits hand traps, negates other things that are relevant. I tried out the skill drains that were in the deck profile that topped. I didn't like it that much because it kind of eliminates my ability to use all of the effects that I like about the deck. Didn't like that. I'm sure it works well in practice because you're shutting down opponents' decks that aren't built to work under skill drain, where yours kind of is a little bit more so. But I just didn't like it, so strikes it is. For the extra deck, double Toad, double Bahamut Shark for the Toad, double Stealth Kraken, double Stealth Kraken Spawn, Cowboy for game, Bagooska, Tornado Dragon, Dweller, Zeus, Area, and Mastar Boy. The extra deck I use almost not at all. A lot of times it ends up just being fodder for Prosperity. You can use it if you want to, but the deck's main deck monster abilities are usually strong enough to set up a pretty nasty board on its own. And if you're in a position where you're not able to set up that nasty board, there's not a lot of scenarios where making an extra deck monster would do that for you. Really the ones, so if you're sending 6 blind off of like a turn 1 Prosperity, I would probably keep the ones that are going to handle niche scenarios. So stuff like Dweller, Tornado Dragon, Bagooska, this Cowboy, where you don't know what you're playing against yet. I guess less so Cowboy, obviously that's more for if you just need to burn for whatever reason, end a game or time. But the Tornado Dragon especially, or the Abyss Dweller, you want to keep in there, so I would hold on to those. Usually it's going to be my spare copy of all these 2-ofs, and then the Link monsters would be a good choice, and one of these guys. Or the Zeus. You don't really need the Zeus, it's just a reset button. And then this, so from here to here is stuff I would actually play in the side deck. If you're going second, it kind of sucks to have to play through a board, because if they shut you down, you don't really have a lot of extra special summons if you can't get the other cards in the deck running. So you need to find a way to protect your monsters as much as you can from a board that's already established, and Dark Ruler does that the best. This is all just back row hate, obviously you guys know that. It's just because there's not really any in the main deck, apart from Tornado Dragon, which is in the extra deck. But outside of that, this negates, but the rest of the stuff doesn't really do much for you in terms of protecting you from back row. A lot of decks don't play back row, and that's why I side all this, but that would be why I do that. And then this is for a similar reason to Dark Ruler. If you're going second, it sucks to have to play through a really good board, so having a 3 and 3 pretty much, I wouldn't say guarantees you, but your odds of opening one of them to help you get through that turn 2 play is going to be very high, and so you need that. This stuff is all stuff that I chose not to play. I just left it in there so I would remember to explain it. So Urashira the Aqua, this thing is coming out today, actually, in Darkwing Blast. I didn't like it. I was really hoping that I would, just because it's kind of interesting new support for the deck, and I wanted it to really fit in nicely, but I couldn't find a great way to fit it in there and not have it feel like I was trying to bend the deck just to play this card versus just cutting this and not worrying about it. If somebody knows how to play this thing efficiently, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love another opportunity to figure out how to fit it in there. But for now, this will stay not in the deck. This thing, as I kind of explained, I might side that just because it can be cool against decks that can go off really hard. However, if you're under the Karyushin lock, that won't happen anyway, but maybe, the game gets away from you. Being able to build your own board and then Raigeki everything can be pretty cool, and it shuts off zones that they can't use anymore, so that could be relevant, but it just wasn't good enough for what it was doing. It ended up being a win more card. And then triple skill drain, like I said, I just like being able to use the effects of the monsters in the deck more than I want to shut down, everything on the board and turn it into 2002 Yu-Gi-Oh, but some people might like it because it just is another element of control, and I wouldn't hate on you for it. So that's the update for this deck. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me here at Libertalia Game Supply on another beautiful Friday. If you got any suggestions or comments about this deck in particular, let me know down below, because I love this deck. It's quickly becoming one of my top 5 all time, and I would love to learn more about it. If there's something you want to see next week, let me know and I'll start working on that. Otherwise, once again, it's been great hanging out with you here again today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great week.